Good morning, and glad to be here. Not quite the end of the week, but it's almost the same thing. It's payday at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, and that means we can all go out after work and do all of our grocery shopping. Some of the things that we have coming up today on the program, I want to talk to you about a story a friend of mine sent me apparently during the overnight hours. Happened to see it on email this morning. It's at WorldNet Daily. It's a story about researchers in Britain who say they can now brainwash you when it comes to your faith and clear it away, as if it's something that's somehow it's a disease to actually have religious faith. We'll talk about that and some of the other applications that this new science may have for big government. That's coming up in a while on the program. But in the meantime, also wanted to mention we'll have reaction to the debate from the Democrats a couple of nights ago from some of the Republican candidates. We didn't hear a lot from them yesterday, but we have some reaction over the last 24 hours that has been coming in from many of them, and I'd like to share that if we could a little later in the program. But in the meantime, I wanted to share with you something I happened to see this morning as I was sitting down at my desk early on and looking through some of my email collection. Came across a couple of pieces, and these have to deal with something called sanctuary cities. Now, you know what those are. Those are the cities run by liberals and where they believe that they shouldn't have to follow federal immigration laws, and therefore that they can turn around and turn everybody loose and perhaps have them vote even if they're not here legally. And of course, vote for the people who let you loose. That would be liberals once again, right? That's how that works. Daily Signal headline: Sanctuary cities on the rise, releasing more than 9,000 criminals in U.S. illegally. And it says, resulting in the release of roughly 1,000 detained illegal immigrants each month, despite objections from the federal government, according to a new study. Now, you don't know how that objection is coming through. You know, the Obama White House objected to Bashir Assad's actions in Syria and said, you cross this red line and you're done. And we know that that didn't hold any water. So Mr. Obama making a threat to local cities, ignoring immigration law, wink, wink, nod, nod, go ahead and do it. 340 of these cities. There are now 340 cities, some of them are actually counties, metropolitan areas, that call themselves sanctuaries for illegal immigrants in the United States. The majority of those shielded from ICE had prior felony charges or convictions, including rape, battery, and drug violations. The analysis of U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement data from January to September of 2014 found. They're not alone at Daily Signal and reporting this story today. Over at National Review, the great historian and writer Victor Davis Hanson has this: are sanctuary cities the new Confederates? And you're thinking, how does he mean that? There are now, and he mentions the 340 cities in the country, and the list is growing. All of them choose to ignore federal immigration law by refusing to report detained, undocumented, as he puts it. That's a word that the liberals would rather have you use, illegal, if you will, immigrants to federal authorities under most circumstances. Then he goes on to write, in the 19th century, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a number of rulings prohibiting particular states from ignoring federal laws, from unpopular tax policies to the establishment of Native American reservations. The most prominent nullificationist was Senator John C. Calhoun. He was from South Carolina, a states' rights advocate and the spiritual godfather of sanctuary cities. Calhoun declared, for example, that federal tariffs should not apply to his state. He also became the godfather of the Confederacy. Now, the man passed away before the Civil War, but it was his idea that states had the ability, they're not provinces. Remember this. We were founded as 50 states, well, 13 in the beginning, but 50 now. Mr. Obama says 57, I realize that. We have states. We do not have provinces. That was because it was supposed to be a union of independent countries, not a series of provinces taking diktats, each with a proconsul from, I don't know, take Ottawa in Canada, for instance, where they have very much a federal system that works that way. And you don't have a lot of autonomy in all of the various provinces. But that was not how the United States was constructed. So Calhoun said, we then, in South Carolina or any other state, legitimately can ignore the laws that we don't believe in. Well, especially after the Civil War, you had a whole series of amendments passed, 13, 14, and 15, that simply said, nope, that's not how it's going to work. If we say it in Washington, you've got to follow it in every one of your state capitals across the country. Hanson goes on to write, what would San Franciscans do if conservative counties and towns followed their lead? Perhaps a rural Wyoming sheriff can now look the other way when he spots a cattleman. shooting a federally protected grizzly bear or predatory timber wolf, or at least shield the cattlemen from federal officials. Should public schools in Provo, Utah, he writes, start the day with school prayers? Right? Because why would you have to follow federal law? You don't have to follow federal law if you're hiding illegal immigrants, right? So why should you have to follow federal law when it comes to prayer in schools? He says the mayor and sheriff of Sanctuary City, San Francisco are kindred spirits with Kentucky county clerks who would like to opt out of licensing gay marriages. Now, I think we've made some of these points on this program before, but this is getting to be a constitutional crisis if this continues. But the thing is, it's being ignored by so many on the American left. And that's the point. It's selective prosecution. It's selective justice that's going on in this country. If Lefty likes this, then Lefty can say, oh, we'll ignore it because we like this notion of hiding these people. If Lefty doesn't like it, take a look at Kentucky. You lock up that county clerk. 12 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. We have a caller with us, and before we get to the call, the telephone number is 736-0300, 736-0300, 45, and you're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, as well as online at newsradio1310.com, and you're up next.
Be coherent. You said that the states don't have to follow the Medicare under Obamacare, but yet you want the federal government.
I want it to be fair. If the federal government, if the federal government allows people like you to overrun my country, were you born here? Thank you much for the call. Hey, I'm just telling you. I think it's fine to nullify the laws. As long as Lefty gets away with it, why shouldn't we do it? I'm not aware that I said we should ever ignore Medicare laws. Medicare is one of those subjects when you come on the radio and start talking about Medicare and Medicaid. It's a bit like saying state auditor. It's like one of those things, or state controller. It immediately telegraphs to people, you can turn the channel now. It's not what in talk radio we'd call exceptionally exciting subjects, so it doesn't come up a whole heck of a lot. The fact of the matter is, if some places can nullify the laws and get away with it, then I guess we can all nullify the laws and get away with it. Whether or not that guy likes it. In other words, he's defending what's going on because he can have a lot of people like him now come here and vote and actually take more out of our treasuries to help themselves without any conception of what that's going to mean ultimately for this country. You want to bankrupt the country? In Africa, when they have famines, there were stories that were told about some of these places. People would be so desperate, they would run out of food, and they would run out of water. They'd have no more vegetables because of a drought that would wipe out the plantings. And they would kill off most of their livestock, but they would hold on generally to, if they could, to a family cow. And they would do that because the family cow could be a good source of protein. But they couldn't kill it right away. So what they would do is they would take out a knife and they would slice a spot on the family cow. And then the members of the family would come along and suck out some blood. And that might buy them a couple of more days of life. And this works out pretty well until eventually the cow, who's cut all over the place and has lost so much blood, the cow dies. Then there's slow, painful, agonizing starvation for that community. That is what we're looking at in the United States. Now, that's called an analogy or metaphor, if you like, but it's telling you this is very similar to a story like that. When you bleed this country dry, there will be nothing left to bleed. And then what are you going to do? Are we going to have people going out and cutting their neighbors and sucking out their neighbors' blood? Because that's ultimately perhaps the only thing you're going to have left as a recourse. How come Lefty cannot see that? Why is Lefty so blind? I'm sick to death of arguing with them when you bring these things up and they sit there for a moment blankly staring at you and then they deflect and then they say, yeah, but. No, the question is, how do you believe, how do you know that this system will survive if we keep doing that? Please tell me. 736-0300, 736-03, because you know better. Deep down in, you know better. There must be a nugget of logic in that fellow who just called, who knows you can't keep bankrupting the system and expect that it will be there a few years down the road. And then what? When there's nothing left to go around, then what? How is it we've got to this point where people think that this is okay? The other night on that stage, a couple of nights ago in Las Vegas, all you heard was free, free, and it'll be free, and this'll be free, and that'll be free, and this'll be free. Go ahead and take it, or we'll take it from someone else. I'll rob from the rich and I'll give to the poor. And I brought that up yesterday. If you took the money from every rich person in America, you took all of their assets, all of their savings, all of their investments, all of their property. In 6 months, you would have blown through that in this country with the expenses that it has. And then what? Then you have an impoverished class that used to make all the money in this country and create all of the jobs in this country. You don't even have them to rely on anymore for tax revenue. How thick do you have to be not to understand that? Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We've got some folks coming by in just a few minutes from the Magic Valley Car Wash. On a lighter note, well, it's not really the activity is lighter. It's a serious topic, though. They're doing a fundraiser to help with Breast Cancer Awareness Month and various research that is going on, and we'd like to share some of their thoughts with you coming up in just a few minutes on the program. I also wanted to point out, if you're listening to the show, that means likely your hearing is better than average. But if you're having difficulty hearing the show, and I try to be as I know that we could sit here and shout all morning long, but that's not necessarily going to change things. But if you're having issues and you need to see someone about it, and it's probably a good idea because at least seeing someone about it, you get over that stage where you're embarrassed by it or something like that can happen. My mother was one of those people. She did want to acknowledge that she was losing her hearing, and it caused a few problems sometimes in the family internally when she'd say, "No, you didn't tell me that," or what's that? How come you're ignoring me? And finally, she got her hearing checked, and sure enough, she needed a little assistance. If that's what you need, we'd like you to give a call to Dr. Christine Pickup. She's a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison. Mount Harrison Audiology, and that's in Rupert, 1218 9th Street, unit number 2. They have a website, mountharrisonaudiology.com, or you can give her office a call directly. That's 208-312-0957. And did you know that the health of the inner ear, it's affected by your cardiovascular and kidney health? The inner ear is very sensitive to changes in your blood supply. If you've had recent heart problems or kidney problems, you should have your hearing checked right away. And remember, her telephone number is 208-312-0957. As I said, we'll talk a little bit about a fundraiser coming up for breast cancer research. That's on the way in just a few minutes, or at least to help people with screenings and the like. There are so many different aspects of all of this. I do want to remind you, if you go to our website, newsradio1310.com, there's a big pink banner around it. And if you click on that banner, there's a couple of ribbons on each side. It will give you details on how you could donate to the Wellness Tree, which is not getting any government money, but is working with women, giving them breast cancer screenings and the like, poor women who couldn't afford it otherwise. In other words, this is being done not through government, but through the goodness of the American people. What a concept. That's the way things used to always run here. And for $1, they can treat 10 women. It's a wonderful program, so check that out if you get an opportunity.